Good morning, everyone. Today's Wednesday, March 25th, and our screencast lesson for today is to finish off our packet pages 32 to 33 on the Mughal Empire. We're going to do a lot of comparison between how the Muslims in India in this Mughal Empire rule over a very similar, diverse society, just like the Ottomans had to in the West and the Middle Eastern region where they had their territory. Your reminder for today is that I will be posting some review questions for the Ottoman and the Mughals that we've learned about this week. It'll be on a Google form, just like our bell ringer questions in class, and those will be due to submit to me on that Google form by the end of Friday. So in our packet, we should be looking at pages 32 and 33. 32 starts off with some geography, understanding the territory and the rulers that expanded into India. And then we're going to compare those same rulers and how they used their policies and different actions that they took to govern over their diverse society in India. So to start on page 32, I'm going to go to the slides now because I want to go over these pages with you completely. I'm not going to give you guys any independent tasks and then post absentee slides later. Since it's only 2 pages, I'm going to go over both of these with you and we'll complete our packet together. Our first question asks, which Mughal ruler added the most territory to the empire? So whenever we're looking at a map, pay attention to the key. Over here, it tells us which of the 3 rulers are adding territory based on how it's labeled. So we have the blue territory in the northwest part of India for Babur. We have all the goldish yellow territory in the central part of India gained by Akbar. And finally, all the orange territory from central to southern India gained by Aurangzeb. So if we compare all 3 of these amounts of territory, I would say that Akbar, the one in the middle, the gold area, that's central, northwest, and eastern parts of India, would be the most. And we'll see some of his accomplishments and his policies in the next page also. Our second question asks us, what geographic feature prevented the Mughal Empire from expanding further to the north? So if we look at the territory that was gained, and we wonder why they couldn't go any farther to the north in this direction here, we have to pay attention to the geographic features labeled on the map. So which geographic feature? The Himalaya mountain should be your response for number 2. Number 3 says, name at least one other empire or ruler of India that we've learned about this year and describe an achievement of theirs. So we've looked at India with 2 different dynasties in the past, the Mauryan dynasty and the Gupta dynasty. So pause the video for a second, think back, or even if you have your packets ready, look back and see what you can remember about the other rulers or empires we've studied in India. Okay, I'm going to give you 2 empires and rulers that we've studied in the past, even though the question's only asking for 1, just to give you an example of some responses that you could have. The first ruler of the Mauryan dynasty that I recall is Ashoka, who was known for spreading Buddhism through sending out traders, missionaries. He even put his son in charge of that program, and he was responsible for the spread of Buddhism from India out into the rest of Eastern Asia. A second leader that we should remember is Chandragupta from the Gupta Golden Age. He was the leader that presided and promoted a lot of the Golden Age achievements and prosperity that the Gupta Golden Age enjoyed. So if you look a little bit further down our page 32, we have a little bit of information about the religious makeup of India. So read over the overview with me, and then we'll answer the questions together. The Mughal Empire was a Muslim dynasty that ruled parts of modern-day India and Pakistan from 1526 to 1857. The Mughal Empire was of Turkic Mongol, which means Mughal was the Hindu word for the Mongolians. It was of Turkic Mongol or Central Asian origin. The Mughal Empire conquered areas of India that included 2 major religious groups in Hindus and Muslims. as well as other smaller religious communities like Buddhists and Sikhs. So our first question is asking, which religion was the foundation of the Mughal Empire? So just like the Ottomans that we learned about, this Mughal Empire is an example of a dynasty that is of Muslim foundation. So the religion that is the basis here is Islam, and Muslims, followers of that religion, are the ones who are ruling over this empire in India. Which other religions were practiced in the Mughal Empire is our second question. So they mention in the reading here that there is already Hindus as well as Buddhists and Sikhs in India. If you remember back to our earlier studies of India, this is where Hinduism developed, and the spin-off religion of Buddhism also had developed. So our response for number 2 should be Hinduism, Buddhism, and Sikhs. Our third question is asking us to predict. What challenges might a diverse empire like the Mughal Empire face, and why? So in order to predict, we're going to have to recall a little bit of what the Ottoman Empire's makeup was like and what kind of challenges they faced too. We'll also answer that in question 4. So take a second to respond to question 3 on your own. You can pause the video here and come back in just a minute. Okay, so the challenges that the Mughal Empire might face could be maintaining the loyalty of non-Muslims, since they are kind of the new population that's ruling over people who had already been there. They need to try to figure out a way to maintain the loyalty of those groups that are already there. The second challenge would be keeping the peace between religious groups. When the Muslims are ruling over this empire, you're going to have Muslims, Sikhs, Hindus, and Buddhists that had already been there, and keeping the peace between these religious groups may be very difficult. For question 4, it's asking us to recall, how did the Ottomans deal with the same challenges of diversity in their empire? First thing that we remember they did was they took minorities and put them into government or military positions. Remember the document that we looked at on the Janissary Corps? These were groups of Christian boys that were trained and put into the elite fighting force of the Ottoman military and into high positions in their government as well. The Ottomans also had very tolerant policies and deals that they gave to their minority groups, to the non-Muslim groups. If you remember the millets, these were communities of non-Muslims that were allowed to practice their own education systems, their own traditions. But the Ottomans also made a deal with them. They said, we'll let you do those things and we will protect that status, but you have to pay a tax. And this was that jizya tax that they imposed on those millet communities, those non-Muslim groups. So now let's compare those rulers on the next page. So we're on page 33. You have some images as well as some information on 4 major rulers of the Mughal Empire. At the very, very top, though, it gives us just a little introduction in italics. It says, how did the Mughals govern their diverse society? The arrival of Islam brought changes to India as great as those caused by the Aryan migrations 2,000 years earlier. As Muslims mingled with Indians, each civilization absorbed elements from the other. So the Aryan migrations 2,000 years earlier that's mentioned here, this is going way, way back to when we learned about the Indus River civilization and how the Aryan nomadic group came into that northwest section, the Indus River Valley of India, and blended with the Indus people there. That's how the religion of Hinduism was slowly developed, blending those traditions and beliefs between the Aryan and the Indus people that were already living there. And now, as Muslims mingle with Indians in this Mughal Empire, this kind of sets the stage for how India is today. It has a large population of Hindus, as well as a pretty large population of Muslims living together in India, but also we see a lot of conflict in the news, and conflicts between these two groups are pretty common in India today. You'll learn a little bit more about how that has developed over the centuries in Global 10 next year. So the directions for this page at the top say, examine the image of Mughal leaders and text below and fill out the questions that follow. So I'll do these questions with you. The first question is saying, identify at least 4 actions taken by Mughal rulers that promoted diversity, and make sure you include the ruler's name. So I want you to pause the video here for just a moment, read through each ruler's accomplishments in the bullets underneath their image, and see if you can make a note, either highlight or underline, any actions or accomplishments that you think are promoting diversity, meaning including non-Muslims, promoting peace and stability amongst the challenge of mixing these people together. Okay, now that you've looked through each Mughal ruler's accomplishments, I want to answer this question with you. We're looking for at least 4 actions taken by Mughal rulers that promote diversity. So your responses can vary. I want to make sure that you guys are writing down at least 4, but you can have more than that. Your response can be any 4 of these orange dots that I have in the document to the left. Be sure to include the ruler's name. So I'm going to just go over these quickly with you. For Babur, I identified 2 things that he was doing that promoted diversity. First is his tolerant policy of allowing Hindus to practice their religion. The second thing Babur does is he allows new Hindu temples to be built. If we look at Akbar the Great, of all of his accomplishments, there are 3 that I noted are promoting diversity. The first is that he is encouraging religious tolerance by selecting Hindus to lead parts of the government. He also marries a Hindu woman and hires Jesuit tutors for his children. Jesuits were a group of Christians that had traveled from Europe into India. So this might remind you of some of the same actions that Ottoman rulers had taken to include non-Muslims in their government in the Ottoman Empire. Just like Akbar the Great is allowing Hindus to be part of the government, remember the Janissary Corps was taking Christian boys and putting them into positions in the government and into the elite fighting force of the Ottoman military. Akbar the Great also ends the non-Muslim tax, the jizya tax. So he's offering them, freedoms, positions in government, allowing them, protection, but not taxing them for it. So that's kind of a free deal that they're getting. And the third action that Akbar makes is Hindus were allowed to govern with their own laws and have control over their institutions. This is very similar to how the Ottomans set up the millet communities, allowing them to educate their children in the traditions and belief systems that they wanted, and let them have a lot of cultural freedom of their own. For our third ruler in the document, Jahangir, there are 2 accomplishments that promote diversity for him. He included large numbers of Hindus and Shiite Muslims in his court. He also develops Urdu, which is a mixture of Arabic, Persian, and Hindi, as the official language of the empire. Now for Aurangzeb, notice there are no accomplishments that he has that really are positive and promoting diversity. He does a lot of negative things for the minority groups, not the minority groups, but for the non-Muslims that are already in India. He's ending the policy of religious tolerance for non-Muslims. He's excluding Hindus from government positions, just kind of taking away all of the accomplishments that the first 3 rulers had done for those Hindus. He is imposing Sharia Islamic law over the entire empire, not allowing these groups to govern with their own laws anymore, and he is even persecuting the Sikh religious group. This is kind of a nice segue into our second question, because I'm asking you here, if you were to award a Golden Age badge to one ruler above, who would it be and why? So take a moment here to pause, look through the accomplishments of all 4 really, but especially all 3 rulers that are noted with having promoted diversity, and look at the other accomplishments that they're making as well. Okay, so I want to see which ruler you would choose that would be credited with a golden age. My pick would be Akbar the Great. And for these reasons, make sure that you're including an explanation and reasons why you're choosing who you're choosing. So my pick would be Akbar the Great because he has the most accomplishments, first of all, but 3 of which show diversity. And all of the others are also positive actions. So if you remember what constitutes a golden age, you need a time of general peace, prosperity, encouragement of successful programs like trade and academics and inventions. So some of these things that are not just promoting diversity that we haven't noted yet for Akbar the Great is that he recaptures territory that was lost from Babur's empire. He is also strengthening trade between Ottoman and Mughal empires. And he's also establishing relationships with Europeans and the Ottoman Empire to acquire firearms. So not just other Muslims in the Ottoman Empire, but also Europeans, Christians as well. So I picked Akbar the Great because of his number of positive accomplishments, but also the fact that he's kind of hitting all of those areas of prosperity for all people, even non-Muslims in the empire, as well as promoting success for the entire society by strengthening trade and strengthening relationships outside of the empire. If you pick somebody else, just make sure that you are explaining the positives of why you think that is an important thing. I would say the runner-up would be maybe Jahangir because of his infrastructure accomplishments. He is doing things like building beautiful monuments, gardens, and palaces. His son Jahan would build the Taj Mahal for his wife. And on my absentee slides, I'm going to include just a couple of video clips if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the story behind the building of the Taj Mahal. All right, guys, so that is the finishing pages of our Unit 4 packet. If there's any questions that you guys have, make sure to look at the absentee slides first to see if there's anything that you need to make up. But going into the rest of this week, I'll be posting some other review assignments, so to go over some enduring issues practice for events and concepts that have come up in our Unit 4 topic. So make sure that you are going over our review questions that I will post a little bit later today. Just as a reminder on our starter screen, those questions will be due Friday by the end of the night. Have a great day and email me with any questions that you guys have. Bye-bye.